Imagine a quiet night in the Sudanese desert, a gentle breeze blowing through the palm trees, a moon hovering over the small, sharp pyramids of the ancient kingdom of Nubia. In the soft light, you, the newly crowned king, sit on a throne carved from ebony and gilded with gold, your hands resting lightly on the embossed lion heads on either side of the armrests, symbols of royal power. You are a pharaoh. Not the pharaoh of Giza or Memphis, but the pharaoh of a civilization long forgotten by history, Nubia. You are the descendant of the black warriors who once united the southern Nile, and now you are preparing for one of the greatest missions in ancient history, to rebuild Egypt, not just with swords and spears, but with religion, culture, compassion, and wisdom. Unlike Hollywood movies often portray, you are not an invader. You are a restorer. From the temple of Amun-Ra on Jebel Barkal, a sacred mountain shaped like a cobra raising its head, you have been chosen by the prophets to take on a divine mission, to unite a land torn apart by greed and atheism. Before you lies a vast but divided kingdom. Northern princes are fighting for power, temples are abandoned, and the people no longer know to whom to pray. But you, a man from the south, are rekindling that forgotten faith. Every step you take north, every temple you rebuild, every sacrifice you preside over, is a step toward rebirth. You can feel the eyes of your ancestors, Nubian warriors and sages, looking down at you from the reliefs painted on the temple walls. Light streams down from the high windows, illuminating scenes you never saw as a prince, the gods crowning you, you leading your army across the Nile, the people bowing before the wisdom of your rule. You are not alone. Beside you are your high advisors, the white-robed priests from Jebel Barkal, who have been with you since childhood. They have taught you not only Egyptian hieroglyphics, but also the ancient Kushite language and the holy books of Amun-Ra. They have helped you understand that this position is not just about power, it is about responsibility. From your throne, you conduct the affairs of state. Today, you must hear a complaint from 2 village chiefs over irrigation rights. Tomorrow, you meet with the architects to approve the design of a new temple in Nepeta. Each day is a test of your justice, your compassion, and your wisdom in governing. And each evening, you return to the harem. The priestesses brush your hair with frankincense oil, a ritual cleansing of the soul, and you turn to the west to pray. You pray for the peace of your people, for your own sanity, and that your mission will not be lost. You know one thing, history will remember your name, not because you won, but because you rebuilt the faith. Imagine a quiet night in the heart of the Sudanese desert. A soft breeze whispers through palm leaves, and the moonlight glows silver over the steep-sided pyramids of Nubia, ancient monuments carved not just from stone, but from legacy. Inside a grand ceremonial hall lined with painted walls and flickering oil lamps, you sit on a throne carved from ebony, inlaid with gold, its armrests ending in lion heads, symbols of power and divine protection. You are not just anyone. You are Pharaoh, not of Thebes or Giza, but of Nubia, a kingdom older than memory and one long overshadowed by its northern neighbor. You are the descendant of warriors, priest-kings, and builders who once ruled lands where the Nile bends southward into Africa. And now, you carry the weight of a grand mission, to restore divine order to a broken world. But make no mistake, you are not an invader. You are a restorer. For centuries, Egypt, the once great bastion of faith and architecture, has crumbled. The temples lie abandoned. Competing princes fight over scraps of land. People no longer remember which god to pray to. But you do. From the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkal, where the silhouette of stone resembles a rearing cobra, you have been chosen. Not by men, but by Ammoniusare himself. Priests have spoken. Oracles have seen. Your purpose is clear. This morning, your body was rubbed with sacred oils imported from the farthest corners of Africa, frankincense from Punt, myrrh from Somalia, shea butter from the western savannas. You stood before a mirror made of polished bronze, seeing not just yourself, but your ancestors behind your eyes. Warriors, scholars, priestesses, all waiting, watching, remembering. Around you the court stirs. Advisors bow low, speaking only when spoken to. Temple priests chant softly as incense fills the air. Your throne room is filled with murals of war, diplomacy, and devotion. You are both king and god, both father and general. And though your crown is heavy, your heart is steady. Your first task? A case between two village elders, a dispute over water rights. It may seem mundane, but you know better. In the desert, water is power. Justice is not a spectacle here, it is survival. You listen to each man carefully, then rule with fairness. Your word becomes law. Your judgment becomes legend. In the afternoon, you walk through the palace gardens. Architects await you under a canopy, their scrolls spread before them on low tables. You review plans for new temples, libraries, and granaries. Every stone must serve a purpose, not just in structure, but in memory. You build not only for today, but for 1,000 years hence. As the sun sets, you bathe in perfumed water, your body cleansed of the dust of power. Priestesses clothe you in soft linen robes. You kneel before the shrine of Ammoniusare, whispering prayers known only to the chosen. You pray not for conquest, but for wisdom, not for fear, but for loyalty, not for glory, but for balance. Later that night you lie awake. The stars above you are the same stars that guided your ancestors. The constellations form patterns only Nubian navigators understand. From the palace roof, you can see the gentle curve of the Nile in the distance, glimmering under moonlight. Tomorrow, the war drums will beat. Tomorrow, your fleet will begin its journey north. Tomorrow, Egypt will see not a conqueror, but a redeemer. Before you can conquer a kingdom, you must first command the gods. In the world of ancient Nubia, politics was never separated from religion. Every crown, every law, every war, all of it rested on one single foundation, the divine will of Ammoniusare. You, as the newly crowned Black Pharaoh, are not merely a king. You are a chosen vessel of the gods. Your bloodline does not come from warriors alone, but from oracles, priests, and heavenly prophecy. When you were still a boy, you were led up the sacred path to Jebel Barkal, the flat-topped mountain revered as the southern home of Ammoniusare. Standing in its shadow, you felt the wind rush down the slopes like the whisper of a giant spirit. The stone peak, when seen from the west, resembles the hooded head of a cobra, a sign, to your people, of divine protection and readiness to strike. The priests told you that this was not just rock, but a living presence, sacred and awake. At the foot of the mountain stands the temple of Ammonius, carved into the cliff itself. It is neither large nor ostentatious, but its energy is unmistakable. Inside, torchlight flickers across the worn sandstone walls, revealing carvings of your ancestors making offerings, receiving blessings, and being crowned beneath the outstretched wings of the falcon god Horus. The smell of frankincense hangs thick in the air. The chants of priests echo in ancient Nubian and liturgical Egyptian. Here, at Jebel Barkal, your journey as pharaoh truly began. The oracle of Ammonius, an elderly priest with eyes that seemed to see beyond time, was the one who proclaimed your divine right to rule. He read the omens in flame, in bird flight, in the lines of water poured over sacred sand. When he called your name in the inner sanctum, all fell silent. The gods had spoken. Your coronation was not just a matter of politics, it was a cosmic ceremony. You were anointed with sacred oils, dressed in linen robes, and presented before the gods. You bowed not only to the people but to the spirit of divine order, Ma'at, the cosmic balance that holds the world together. This belief in cosmic harmony shapes everything you do. Your daily rituals begin before the sun rises. In the holy inner courtyard, surrounded by columns carved with hieroglyphs and lotus symbols, you kneel beside a basin of cold river water. You wash your face and hands in silence. Then, standing before the golden statue of Ammonius, you light incense and whisper prayers for guidance, justice, and clarity. Only then do you allow your advisors to speak. Priests from across the land make pilgrimage to your court, from Napata to Thebes. They bring scrolls, sacred animals, and questions only a divine ruler can answer. Some seek permission to expand temples. Others bring reports of bad omens, a failed harvest, a sick bull, a broken statue. All such things have spiritual meaning. All demand your interpretation. But religion is not just ritual, it is political power. When you travel, it is not as a man, but as the embodiment of divine will. Trumpets announce your arrival. White-robed priests lead the way. Before you enter a city, a sacrifice is made. A bull is offered. A priest chants the 42 negative confessions, ensuring the gods will welcome your presence. At each temple, you make offerings personally. You pour libations of wine, lay bundles of papyrus and grain, light sacred fire. You do not simply watch, you participate. The people must see that their pharaoh is not above the gods. He serves them. This is how you gain trust, not just of your own people, but of the Egyptian priests who might otherwise resist your rule. They know you are not a foreign conqueror. You worship their gods. You speak their sacred tongue. You uphold their rights. In time, even the skeptical high priests in Thebes come to respect you. You do not replace their traditions, you reinforce them. But there is more. You begin constructing new temples, not only in Egypt but also across Nubia. These are not copies of Egyptian architecture, but hybrids. Nubian columns with lotus capitals. Temples aligned with both the sun and the flow of the Nile. You order inscriptions to be carved in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Meroitic script, ensuring both peoples see their identity reflected in stone. And above all, you empower women in religious life, a distinctly Kushite tradition. Your sister, Ammonius, is installed as God's wife of Ammonius in Thebes, a title that gives her not only spiritual authority but real political influence. She oversees temple lands, wealth, and ritual life, acting almost as a queen in her own right. Her presence strengthens your legitimacy in Egypt. It's through religion that you knit two worlds together, Nubia and Egypt, black and bronze, south and north. No sword could do what one prayer, offered humbly in the Holy of Holies, could accomplish. Yet you are not a god. You are a man. There are moments of doubt. Nights when the stars feel cold and distant. Days when the weight of divine expectation is unbearable. The gods are not always clear. Sometimes the oracles contradict. Sometimes the signs seem to mock you. But still you rise. You kneel. You chant. Because you know, to abandon devotion is to invite disaster. And so, each morning before the council meets, before armies march, before judgment is passed, you return to the sacred flame, to the quiet temple, to the hidden room where no one sees but the gods. You pray not to be powerful. You pray to be worthy. The morning of your coronation is unlike any other day you've lived. You wake before sunrise, your breath slow and steady in the cool darkness of the temple chamber. A priest stands by with a shallow bronze basin of river water. Without a word, you rise and wash, not simply to clean the body, but to cleanse the soul. Outside, the wind murmurs like a voice from the mountain. Today, you will be crowned pharaoh. But not in Thebes, not in Memphis, not even in a palace. Today, you will ascend beside the gods, at Jebel Barkal, the sacred heart of Nubia. You walk barefoot across the stone tiles, led by senior priests in linen robes that billow softly with each step. The path is lined with burning torches. Chanting begins faintly in the distance, a call not to people but to eternity. It grows louder with each passing minute, echoing off the mountain walls like waves from an invisible sea. Above you rises Jebel Barkal, the flat-topped sandstone mountain that has loomed in the imagination of your people for generations. It is no ordinary rock. To Nubians and Egyptians alike, it is believed to be the earthly dwelling place of Ammonius Ra, the father of gods, the giver of kingship, the hidden one whose breath powers the sun. And today, before this ancient witness, you will receive the crown. You reach the foot of the mountain, where the temple of Ammonius lies partly carved into the rock face itself. The entrance is narrow but majestic, guarded by stone statues of rams, symbols of Ammonius' strength and patience. The torches flicker against their ancient eyes. Inside, the air is thick with incense and history. You step into the darkness. Drums begin to beat, slow and deep, like the pulse of the earth. A circle of high priests encircles you in silence. They chant in ancient tongues, Meroitic, Egyptian, Kushite, weaving a tapestry of sacred sound that stretches backward in time for centuries. You stand still as they anoint your skin with sacred oils, each one representing a cosmic force: the Nile, the desert, the stars, the breath of Ammonius himself. You are dressed in ritual robes, a leopard skin sash across your chest, gold cuffs on your wrists, sandals made of woven reeds. A long linen headdress is placed upon your head, covering your shoulders. Finally, the ceremonial crown, a double uraeus cobra crown, gilded and deadly, is brought out in silence. The oracle approaches. His face is lined by time, eyes clouded but strangely aware. He raises his arms and all noise stops. Even the wind outside seems to hold its breath. "You are not merely a man," he says. "You are chosen. Not born of blood alone, but of purpose. Not to rule, but to restore." He lifts the crown and places it on your head. In that moment, a shaft of golden sunlight breaks through a hidden opening in the temple roof, striking the altar behind you. It bathes you in light, illuminating the carvings on the wall, a king receiving the ankh of life from Ammonius. It is not coincidence. It is a sign. The priests fall to their knees. A cry goes up: "Pharaoh of Nubia and Egypt, son of the hidden one, restorer of Maat." Outside, trumpets wail. A wave of cheers sweeps through the assembled crowd beyond the temple. You do not smile. You do not raise your arms in triumph. Instead, you close your eyes, because you feel it now. Not glory, but gravity. The weight of gods. The weight of ancestors. The weight of history turning in your direction. Later, after the chants have faded and the people have returned to their villages, you sit alone before the mountain. You trace the horizon with your eyes, watching the sun set behind the golden cliffs of Nubia. For centuries, your people were called barbarians, forgotten by foreign scribes, dismissed as mere shadows in the margins of Egypt's grand story. But now the story is yours. You have not taken the crown by force. You have been chosen by heaven and affirmed by your people. You carry not only spears and laws, but meaning, the kind that builds temples and binds kingdoms. Tonight, you will sleep beneath the stars as your ancestors once did, without walls, without fear. Because now, you do not need to fear the world. The world will remember you. The crown may shine in gold, but its weight is forged in iron. The morning after your coronation, you rise before the first rooster's cry. The linens still smell of frankincense from last night's ceremony, but there is no time for nostalgia. You are no longer a prince. You are Pharaoh now, and pharaohs do not wake to comfort. They wake to command. Your personal steward kneels at your door before you open it. Behind him waits a scroll of names, requests, reports, and obligations. The kingdom has not paused to celebrate. It never does. Its pulse beats with or without your glory. You step into the main audience chamber of your palace in Nepeta. The throne is no longer a distant symbol. It is a chair you must fill every day. It sits elevated on a platform of polished sandstone, flanked by ebony pillars and guarded by lion statues. When you sit, your voice must become the voice of law, and your silence must be as commanding as thunder. This morning, a dispute awaits. Two village chiefs argue before you. One claims his canals have been sabotaged. The other says the Nile shifted naturally. Their voices rise. You let them speak. You must. Listening is the first skill of a ruler. When they finish, all eyes turn to you. You ask one question, then another, then silence again. You deliver judgment, firm, fair, final. A scribe writes your words onto papyrus as temple guards nod. The two men bow. They do not argue. Your justice has spoken. You return to your inner hall where the royal architects await, scrolls spread before them. They are not just builders, they are storytellers in stone. They present designs for new temples in Nubia and Thebes, sanctuaries that will bear your name for millennia. One temple aligns with the summer solstice. Another faces the flow of the sacred Nile. You review every detail, the number of columns, the inscriptions, the lotus motifs, the color of the stone. Each line etched in limestone will echo your reign. You approve some plans, reject others, and order a revision of one that feels too Egyptian. You are pharaoh of two lands, yes, but your style must whisper, "This was Nubian." Midday arrives. You are weary but cannot rest. Delegates arrive from Upper Egypt, bearing gifts and concerns. A drought is beginning. You send engineers and carts of grain. You offer words of comfort but remind them, even drought obeys Ma'at, the balance of the universe. In hardship, the people must not forget devotion. Your general approaches next. He bows deeply. The troops await inspection, divine one. You sigh softly. Even your breath is no longer your own. You ride to the barracks in a ceremonial chariot, not to inspire fear, but unity. The soldiers, many of them Egyptian, some Nubian, line up under the blazing sun. They strike their shields in salute. You walk the line, looking into eyes both hopeful and hard. These are not mercenaries. They are the keepers of your borders, the enforcers of your word. You speak plainly. You are not just men of war. You are men of order. Each step you take on this earth must honor Ammonius. Each sword you raise must be for justice, not greed. You wear the falcon not to dominate, but to protect. The men nod. Some raise fists. Others kneel. One cries softly. They chant your name, but you know, Loyalty is not built in a day. You must earn it with every campaign, every restraint, every wise command. That night, you dine in silence. A meal of roast fowl, barley bread, sweet grapes, and wine is placed before you. A food taster samples it first, then retreats without a word. You eat slowly, eyes watching the flame of the oil lamp flicker. A painting nearby shows a past pharaoh leading a lion by a rope, a symbol of control. But you wonder, what if the lion is not tamed, merely patient? A scroll is delivered from Thebes. It warns of unrest, northern princes growing restless, questioning your claim. You expected this. Egypt does not surrender easily. But it is not fear you feel, it is focus. You will not respond with blood. Not yet. You will respond with temples, roads, justice, and only when needed, with steel. Before bed, you enter the private shrine built into your chambers. You light incense. You kneel before the statue of Ammoniusare, carved from black basalt. Your lips do not move. Your prayer is silent, for strength, for clarity, for patience. You think of your father. He never ruled. He died a general, sword in hand, name forgotten by most. You think of your mother, a high priestess, stern but wise, who taught you that power begins with humility. You think of your people, divided, watching, waiting. You know they do not need a god. They need a man who listens, a king who serves, a pharaoh who kneels as often as he commands. And so, as the palace grows quiet and the stars return, you breathe deeply. Not because the day is over, but because it begins again tomorrow. With new disputes, new plans, new challenges, new chance to rise. The Nile does not rush. It moves with purpose. And so must you. Your campaign to reclaim Egypt begins not with war cries, but with whispers, prayers to Ammoniusare and hushed discussions in torchlit war chambers. You know that conquest is not just about strength. It is about timing, faith, and the precision of patience. But now, patience has run its course. The time to act has come. At dawn, your fleet lies moored along the curved banks of the Nile in Nubia. Dozens of wooden warships, long, narrow, carved with ram-headed prows, gently rock in the current. The air smells of acacia wood oil and river mist. You stand at the edge of the dock in full ceremonial armor, gold-plated breastplate, a linen kilt belted in lapis and carnelian, and a double cobra crown gleaming under the rising sun. Behind you, priests chant blessings. Before you, hundreds of troops, archers, charioteers, engineers, and temple guards kneel in formation. You speak simply. This is not conquest. This is restoration. Egypt has forgotten her gods. Her temples are silent. Her laws are broken. We go not to destroy, but to rebuild. The soldiers strike their fists to their chests and cry as one. For Ammoniusare, for the divine Pharaoh. The trumpets sound. You step aboard the lead vessel as banners unfurl, bearing your royal cartouche. Drums begin to pound, slow, steady, like the heart of Kush itself. With a deep groan of wood and oars plunging into water, the fleet begins its journey northward. This is not a straight path. The Nile, ancient and knowing, will test you. First come the cataracts, the great stone-choked rapids that divide lower Nubia from Egypt. These treacherous waters are known even to seasoned sailors. Your vessel rocks, creaks, slams into foam. Rowers chant with gritted teeth. You stand tall at the prow, gripping the rail, letting the spray hit your face. Your general shouts orders. A supply boat nearly tips. One priest vomits over the side. But the gods are with you. You pass. The river calms. Days pass in rhythmic flow, sunrises over papyrus marshes, evenings under stars. You visit each ship, eat with your men, listen to their concerns. You are not just a figure carved into a temple wall, you are present. Soldiers talk about it when they think you can't hear. The Pharaoh walks among us. When you stop at river settlements, you show restraint. You allow local officials to retain their posts, if they swear loyalty. Most do. A few resist. You let your generals handle them. Firm, swift, minimal blood. You make a point of feeding the people, rebuilding grain stores, repairing roads. Your conquest leaves no ashes, only order. Then you reach Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt, home to the great temple complex of Karnak, but also home to unease. The high priests here once ruled in shadow while Egypt fractured. Now, they watch your approach with cautious reverence. You do not storm the gates. You send emissaries first. A week of negotiations passes, prayers, formal letters, offerings. Then, finally, they open the gates. You enter not as a conqueror, but as a restorer. You order your soldiers to remain outside the temple. You walk in barefoot. You carry no weapon. The high priest meets you at the steps of the hypostyle hall. His beard is white, but his eyes still sharp. He nods slowly. Egypt has waited long for a king who does not rob the gods. You bow and offer incense. Together, you perform the rites of Ammoniasare. That night, the city does not burn. It sings. The people fill the streets with oil lamps, music, and stories. Old men recall the days of strong rule. Mothers hold their children up to glimpse the Pharaoh who speaks like a priest and walks like a warrior. You do not indulge in celebration. You return to your chambers, a modest guest residence offered by the temple, and write letters to your commanders still further south. We have entered Egypt, but Egypt is not yet whole. As you prepare to sleep, your steward brings troubling news. A northern prince, Namlat of Heracleopolis, is rallying troops. He refuses to acknowledge your rule. He has allied himself with mercenaries, pirates, and, worse, priests who have turned against the gods for coin. You do not react with anger. You call for maps. You mark troop positions. You ask for weather reports. You do not chase war. But when war comes, you meet it like the Nile, unrelenting, inevitable, and sacred. The campaign has begun, and Egypt is watching. Thebes does not speak in shouts. It whispers in stone. As you walk beneath the towering pylons of Karnak Temple, the stone seems to breathe. The hieroglyphs shimmer in the light of torches. Colossal statues rise around you like sleeping gods. Every column bears a name, a memory, a moment carved into eternity. And now, your name will be among them. The people of Thebes have not yet chosen you in their hearts. They have allowed you in. But that is not the same as belonging. Egypt remembers too much. It has seen kings come and go, Libyan warlords, corrupt priests, puppet rulers from distant cities. They've bowed before power only to see it vanish in smoke. So you do not demand their loyalty. You earn it. Each day in Thebes, you do not hide behind palace walls. You walk the streets in daylight, guarded but accessible. You listen to vendors, scribes, and temple workers. You speak to farmers bringing papyrus bundles down the river. They bow awkwardly. You do not speak as a god. You speak as a man who remembers dust, heat, and hunger. At Karnak, you meet with the high priest every morning at sunrise. The inner sanctum is opened, a rare honor. Together, you light incense. You pour water over the feet of Ammonia's statue. You do not simply observe the ritual. You embody it. This is how pharaohs become gods, not through force, but devotion. Thebes begins to change. Children gather in alleys to chant your name. Temple scribes add your likeness to mural outlines. Former skeptics now speak of dreams, of seeing you crowned by Ammonius in visions. You sponsor the rebuilding of neglected shrines. You fund irrigation channels for farmers near the floodplain. You send Nubian engineers, and they work side by side with Egyptian laborers. When one village is struck by disease, you personally send healers, salves, and grain. The people begin to say, "He remembers the old ways. He walks softly, but the gods walk with him." But peace is never permanent. News arrives from the north. Namlat of Heracleopolis, the last of the resisting princes, has fortified himself with hired swords and outlaw priests. He mocks your reign in letters sent to the temples. He declares your rule a desert illusion. He has begun harassing trade routes. He has burned 2 river outposts loyal to your cause. Your generals urge war. A swift strike. Burn the city. Be done with him. But you see deeper. This is not just about Namla. It is about Egypt's soul. To win with blood is easy. To win with belief, that is what endures. You call for a war council. Your generals, ministers, and temple leaders gather beneath the shadow of Karnak's hypostyle hall. You stand not above them, but among them. Maps are unrolled. Troop positions marked. Supply lines calculated. All the logic of conquest is laid before you like a game board. But then you ask, what will remain when we are finished? Smoke? Bones? Or faith? The hall falls silent. You declare your strategy, a siege, not with fire, but with presence. Surround. Isolate. Offer mercy. Let the gods see who kneels willingly. As preparations begin, you return to the inner sanctum of Ammonius one final time. Alone. You kneel. You lay your weapons at the altar. You speak no grand prayer. Only this. Let this be not my victory, but yours. Let me be an instrument of restoration, not ruin. And somehow, the chamber feels warmer. A torch flutters without wind. A small sign. Perhaps enough. The next day, you mount your chariot. Your army follows in silence. The banners of Nubia and Egypt fly side by side. Trumpets sound not with glory, but with resolve. As you leave Thebes, the people line the streets in silence. Not cheering, honoring. A few bow. A few raise hands in blessing. You do not look back, because what lies ahead will define your reign forever. The air before Heracleopolis is thick with silence, not of peace, but of reckoning. You arrive at the outskirts of the fortified city 3 days after leaving Thebes. Your army fans out across the low hills surrounding the outer walls. Standard bearers plant the flags of Nubia and Egypt side by side, their fabrics snapping in the rising desert wind. The city itself is no stranger to war. Tall stone walls, defensive towers, and layers of gates built across generations show that Heracleopolis has always prepared for battle. But today, it faces something different. Not just soldiers, but conviction. Prince Namlat watches you from his high terrace. He has mocked your divinity. He has scorched villages. He has raised temples in his name and defaced those of Ammonius. Now, he hides behind battlements, behind foreign mercenaries and promises of old alliances. But you do not raise your voice. You raise your banner. The siege begins without an arrow fired. You surround the city, methodically and with discipline. No looting, no fires. You cut supply routes, but allow families to leave safely. You send emissaries with scrolls, sealed in your royal cartouche, offering pardon for all who surrender and return to the worship of Ammonius. Namlat responds with silence, then with threats, then with stones hurled from the city walls. Still you wait. Your generals grow restless. Let us strike now, one says, before his allies regroup. Another, your mercy gives him time to dig deeper. But you remember your vow at Karnak. Let this not be my victory, but Ammonius. So you pray beneath the stars, not for easy triumph, but for clarity. And then, on the sixth day, a strange thing happens. A group of civilians emerges from the city gate, unarmed, barefoot, and holding palm branches. Women, elders, temple acolytes. They kneel before your army. One speaks, trembling. We no longer follow Namla. He has closed the temples. He has hoarded grain. We ask for your protection. Your reply is calm, immediate. Then you are already under it. That night, your camp is quiet. You order bread and clean water sent into the city under a flag of truce. The next morning, dozens more defect. Then soldiers. Then one of Namlot's own cousins, who slips through a side gate and begs for forgiveness. Namlot grows paranoid. He arrests priests. He tortures engineers. His fear becomes visible. By the 12th day, only his most loyal mercenaries remain. The city is fractured, hollowed out from within. And still, you do not attack. You do something far more dangerous. You walk to the front gates alone, dressed not for war but for worship, white linen robes, gold collar, sandals laced with red. In one hand you carry incense, in the other the crook and flail, symbols of mercy and justice. Your generals hold their breath. Archers ready. Drums stop. And slowly the gates open. Namlat appears, gaunt, robe torn, eyes hollow. He says only, "Are you a god?" You answer, "No, but I serve one." He drops his sword, kneels, and Heracleopolis falls, not to fire, but to faith. You enter the city not on a chariot, but on foot. You go straight to the main temple, once defiled, now reopened. You cleanse the altar with sacred oils. You order statues restored, walls repainted, oracles reinstated. The people watch from balconies and rooftops, unsure if they are witnessing a king or a miracle. You know the truth, you are neither. You are a man who chose restraint over wrath. A pharaoh who conquers not through destruction, but alignment with the divine. That night, you return to your quarters and finally rest. Your hands smell of cedarwood and ash. But the city is whole. And tomorrow, it will rise again under new light. Victory brings silence. The drums stop. The swords return to sheaths. The crowds disband. Heracleopolis bows. But peace is not the end of conflict. It is merely the shifting of shadows. And some shadows are cast not by enemies, but by those closest to your throne. You return to Thebes in triumph. The streets are lined with garlands, priests chant your praises, and children toss lotus petals before your path. But your face does not smile. Your eyes are fixed ahead. You know too well that true danger rarely rides a chariot. Inside the palace, the air is different. There is no cheering. There is calculation. Servants bow deeper. Ministers speak more carefully. Brothers speak less. Because now you are not just Pharaoh. You are Pharaoh without rivals. And that is terrifying to those who once saw you as equal. Your half-brother, Kushan, greets you with a wide smile and words of loyalty. But his eyes flicker when you mention the temple reforms in the north. He was once heir apparent before your divine coronation. Now, he controls grain shipments from Nepeta and whispers into the ears of nobles who still fear Nubian dominance over Egyptian lands. Your aunt, a priestess of Mut and a sharp political mind, warns you in private. Watch your brother's hands, not his mouth. You summon your inner circle. The vizier, the high priest of Karnak, your Nubian general, and your sister Amonis, God's wife of Ammonius, whose influence in Thebes grows with every festival. Together, they represent the spine of your reign. You speak plainly. We have taken cities. Now we must guard the throne, not with soldiers, but with clarity. The high priest advises unity through marriage alliances. The vizier suggests audits of noble treasuries. The general recommends a show of force. Parade your army across Upper Egypt. Your sister says nothing until they leave. Then she turns to you and says, "You do not need to show power. You are power, but power must breathe or it will break." You nod. She is right, as always. So, you begin reshaping the court. You appoint Egyptian scribes alongside Nubian priests in temple councils. You distribute land to loyal governors from both cultures. You host open forums, rare in royal courts, where merchants, farmers, even foreign traders may voice concerns in your presence. This does not go unnoticed. Some call you weak, others call you mad. But among the people, your name grows. The pharaoh who listens. The bridge between blood and crown. Still, the threats remain. One evening, a servant girl drops a sealed scroll into your hand and vanishes into the night. Inside is a list of names, nobles, priests, and foreign agents who plot to restore a pure Egyptian line. You recognize several. One is a man you once dined with. Another is your cousin's husband. You do not send assassins. You do not burn homes. You summon them, one by one, to your throne room. There, you say nothing at first. You only stare. And when they kneel, uncertain, you finally speak. There are no pure crowns, only pure service. Swear it now, or leave Egypt forever. Some kneel. Some flee. You let them go. The pharaoh does not need to chase mice. The sun simply rises, and shadows run. But not all shadows flee. Late one night, a fire breaks out in a granary near the Temple of Ptah in Memphis. Officials call it an accident. You know better. You travel to Memphis in disguise, robed like a merchant, hood drawn. You walk the streets. You listen to markets. You hear what the officials will not say aloud. The fire was set to test his reach. If he does nothing, he is not pharaoh. So you act. You rebuild the granary, twice as large. You pay the families of the lost grain. And you order a new monument built beside it, not to your own glory, but to the goddess Renanudit, protector of harvests. The people are stunned. Even your enemies blink. You have answered treason with generosity. You have reminded them, this pharaoh does not react. He responds. In your private chambers that night, you sit alone, not in gold, not in linen, but in silence. Your crown rests on a simple wooden table. Your wine remains untouched. And you think not of war, but of legacy. You whisper to no one, I did not want to rule. I was called. And if I must defend this kingdom, I will. But I will not become the monster they expect. And so you rise again, not for power, not for fear, but for something harder to hold, balance. You can conquer cities. You can tame rivers. But you cannot outrun time. And so, as the years pass, your thoughts begin to shift from victory to permanence, from ruling the land to outlasting it. You are no longer the young warrior who stood in the bow of a warship. The fire in your blood has cooled, though it has not faded. Your hands still carry the flail of justice, but now they tremble just slightly when you lift the cup of wine. In the twilight of your reign, you see what even the gods must acknowledge. Power fades, but stone remembers. You summon your architects, not the ones who build walls, the ones who build eternity. They arrive in silence, robes dusty, scrolls tucked under arms, faces carved by sun and purpose. You speak not of fortresses, but of pyramids, not of conquest, but of constellations. Build me a home for my name, you say, one that speaks not to the moment, but to the millennia. Their plans are ambitious. You approve them. A royal necropolis at Nuri, north of Nepeta, not in Egypt, but in the soil of your ancestors. Here they will raise pyramids, steep-sided like those of your fathers, smaller than Giza, but closer to the gods. Unlike Egyptian tombs that lie flat and wide, Nubian pyramids rise sharp and defiant, as if pointing to the heavens. You do not want to mimic the past. You want to continue it in your own tongue, in your own light. At Jebel Barkal, the sacred mountain, you commission a new sanctuary carved directly into the rock. Inside, artisans etch your image offering wine to Ammonius, Mut, and Khonsu. You stand not above them, but beside them. Pharaoh, yes, but also a servant of harmony. Outside, the builders raise columns nearly 70 feet tall. One will fall centuries later, but one will remain, its surface covered in stars and ancient prayers, outlasting war, empire, and fire. But you do not build only with stone. You build with words. You call for your scribes. You dictate the tomb texts of Nubia, prayers, hymns, records of laws, oaths of justice, invocations of divine order. You include your failures, your doubts, your moments of silence. You say, let truth be carved, not just glory. And so it is. Each night, you walk beneath the stars, not in procession, not with guards, alone. You raise your eyes and see Orion rise, the ancient hunter, the same stars your father once saw and his father before him. You whisper, I do not ask to live forever, only to be remembered with understanding. And in the silence of the desert, perhaps the stars answer. One morning, a messenger arrives from far to the north. The Assyrians march again, stronger, colder, with iron and fire. Your advisors urge retreat, reinforcement, resistance. But you do not flinch, because you understand now, legacy is not always preserved through survival. Sometimes, it is preserved through meaningful defiance. You send envoys to your sons. You bless your sister Ammonis, who now governs Thebes with the grace of both priestess and queen. You choose a successor, not the strongest, but the wisest. Not the loudest, but the most faithful. And finally, you return once more to the sanctuary at Nuri. There, you place your hand on the unfinished capstone of your own pyramid. The stone is still warm from the sun. The wind hums like a hymn. And you say nothing, because words have done their work. Now stone must speak. That night you sleep deeply. No dreams, no fears, only silence, only stars. And somewhere, far in the future, a traveler will find the ruins of a pyramid. They will read your name. They will not know your battles, but they will see the line carved beneath it. He chose to serve what would outlive him. Centuries pass. Winds rise. Stones crack. Names fade. And the kingdom you built, the Nubian dream that once rose beside the Nile, begins to vanish from memory. Not because it failed, not because it was small, but because history, when written by others, chooses who gets remembered. And Nubia was inconvenient. Your pyramids still stand, not as tall as Giza, but sharper, more defiant. The temples at Jebel Barkal still hold the smell of incense in stone. The steel carved with your prayers still sing, if anyone dares listen. But empires shift. Assyria storms south. Persia looms in the east. Rome watches from afar. And Egypt, ever Egypt, folds again into new masters, new gods, new tongues. The Nubian line weakens, recedes, and drifts back south. And the world forgets. European explorers arrive millennia later, brushing sand from the tops of your pyramids. They stare in disbelief. Blacks built these, they whisper. They assume imitation. They assume accident. They do not ask the right questions, because they have already decided the answers. The 25th dynasty, the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs, is called an anomaly, an accident, a brief spark in an Egyptian timeline. But they do not see what you built. You did not mimic Egypt. You restored it. You did not rule with violence. You ruled with ritual, reverence, and balance. You were not a shadow of another civilization. You were the spine of one. In time, archaeologists begin to see more. They study the steep-sided pyramids, the unique writing system, the way you fused Nubian soul with Egyptian structure. They find records in stone, a pharaoh who chose mercy over fire, a priestess who ruled a city, a dynasty that marched north not to conquer, but to correct. They find references in the Hebrew Bible to Harka, king of Ethiopia, protector of Jerusalem. They find theology preserved only in Nubian tombs, texts lost to Egypt, but carved into your eternal walls. You did not just rule. You saved memory itself. And yet, to most of the modern world, your name is still missing. No films, no textbooks, no golden statue in world museums. Only dust. And the stars. But maybe that's enough. Because stone remains. And when stone is touched by truth, it outlives the pen. And in the quiet of the Sudanese desert, where the Nile bends, your pyramid still catches moonlight. Children of Nubia still carry your blood. The wind still moves through the columns of Karnak. And somewhere, a traveler touches a relief carved in your time, and feels something move. You wouldn't last a day as a Nubian pharaoh. Not because of war. Not because of famine. Not even because of politics. But because of the silence. The silence you carried. The silence you chose when you could have screamed. The silence that said, "Let my legacy not shout, but endure." And so it does. Beyond the polished throne halls, beyond the towering pylons of Karnak, and far from the war banners flapping over conquered cities, lies a quieter Nubia, a truer Nubia, one without gold but not without worth. If you wish to understand the soul of the empire you rule, you must leave the palace and walk where sandals sink into dust, where the Nile runs slow and wide, and where no one calls you pharaoh. Here, in the villages nestled between riverbanks and low hills, life begins before the sun rises. You hear the bray of goats, the swish of water lifted in clay jars, the soft songs of women grinding sorghum into flour. Children run barefoot through alleys between mud brick homes, chasing one another with laughter and sticks shaped like spears. Their mothers shout after them in a mix of tongues, Meroitic, Egyptian, Kushite, blending like the Nile itself. Men work the land with curved tools, coaxing millet, barley, and wheat from the dry earth. The flood has come, but not as high as last year, so each seed must count. Goats bleat, fish dry in nets strung over wooden frames, and smoke rises from cooking fires where flatbread bakes on hot stones. There is no glory here, but there is rhythm, and it has its own kind of power. Artisans sit cross-legged near courtyards, shaping red clay into pots, their fingertips moving with the grace of old prayers. The pottery is more than practical, it speaks. A black-topped jar tells you where its maker was born. A swirling pattern says what clan they belong to. Nearby, a woman spins dyed thread, her fingers stained indigo and her bracelets clinking softly. On the edge of town, traders haggle over beads, ivory combs, and tiny amulets carved from bone. At night, fires are lit not for ritual, but for story. Elders sit on woven mats and speak to wide-eyed children of spirits in the river, jackals who speak in dreams, and kings who forgot humility and paid dearly for it. No scroll records these tales. They live only in voice, in memory, and in rhythm. Here, stories are not decorations. They are instruction. Music is constant, even when silence reigns. Drums call the gods. Flutes call the rain. Songs call the ancestors, and the ancestors answer through dreams and wind. During harvest, faces are painted in white ash and ochre, and dancers leap between fields, arms outstretched like birds. Laughter rises like smoke, loud, fearless, unashamed. Women hold the villages together. They are more than wives, more than mothers. They are guides, judges, traders, weavers of not only cloth, but of knowledge. A woman here can own land, can oversee a market stall, can even, when times demand, lead warriors into defense of their children. They feel shifts in seasons before the soil does. They say things like, the wind is too quiet, change is coming, and somehow, it always does. There are scribes here too. Boys trained to hold reed pens and shape symbols into clay or parchment. Their fathers were farmers. Their sons may become priests. One boy writes stories in the dirt with his finger when no one's watching. When asked what he wants to be, he does not say warrior. He says, the one who remembers. And that, perhaps, is where the kingdom truly rests, not in power, but in remembrance. You see now that all you built as Pharaoh, temples, campaigns, decrees, rests on a people who rise with the Nile and sleep beneath the stars. They will not have tombs of granite. No cartouches will bear their names. But they are the pulse beneath your crown. If you had spent more time among them, if you had listened, you would have learned that empire is not just ruled. It is lived, and it is kept alive not by generals, but by grandmothers. Not by decrees, but by lullabies. Not by stone, but by seed, breath, and song. This is Nubia, not just in temples, but in firelight, in food, in footsteps, in forgotten names that still whisper when the wind shifts. Long after the last trumpet fades, after the last priest lowers the incense burner, after the last scribe dips his brush, something still lingers in the dust of Nubia. Not a statue, not a war, but a silence that hums with memory, waiting. You ruled a kingdom. You carried gods on your shoulders, made justice from speech, turned temples into living mountains. You walked beside the Nile not as a man but as the breath of Ma'at, balance in flesh. You touched the minds of soldiers and the hearts of farmers. You listened when others would command. You spared when others would burn. And now you are gone. But your question remains. What is remembered and what is erased? You see, history is not lost. It is buried in the pause before a child asks, who were we? In the shadow behind a forgotten steel. in the corner of a museum where no tour guide lingers. The legacy of Nubia, your Nubia, was not swallowed by time. It was pushed aside because it disrupted the narrative. It proved that brilliance was not born only in white stone and northern tongues. It showed that black hands could carve gods, that black minds could govern vast lands, that black women could rule temples, cities, and the rhythm of empires. And that was inconvenient. But stone has memory. And now, as new voices rise and old truths are uncovered, the name of Nubia begins to return. Not as a footnote, but as a foundation. Historians now read what was once ignored. Young scholars translate Meroitic script. Children in Sudan visit the pyramids and ask, was he like us? He was. He is. Because empire, Real Empire, is not the sound of boots or the gleam of gold. It is the soft hand of a mother pressing grain into the earth, the whisper of a priest in a dim chamber, the step of a boy who chooses to write instead of fight, the breath of a pharaoh who chooses restraint over rage. That is Nubia. That is what remains. If you had ruled longer, perhaps your name would be louder. If your tomb were taller, perhaps it would draw more eyes. But perhaps it is better this way, because what you left behind was not meant to dazzle. It was meant to last. You left behind stone that still stands. Stories that still travel on the breath of elders. Ideas that still threaten modern lies. That power must be cruel, that color defines civilization, that dignity requires noise. You knew better, and you proved it in silence. Now someone reads this. Maybe a student, maybe a descendant, maybe someone who has never heard your name. And maybe they understand, for just a moment, that greatness has many faces. And one of them once walked barefoot through the sand of Nubia, offering incense to gods who still listen. Maybe they'll remember you not as a conqueror, but as a king who chose to heal. Not as a myth, but as a man who built with balance. And maybe that is how it should end. Not with thunder, but with truth. Not with monuments, but with memory. Not with shouting, but with a whisper that still echoes. You wouldn't last a day as a Nubian Black Pharaoh, but he lasted long enough for the world to remember.